Well, I come to this now. The nationwide lockdown has been devastating for the economy. The taxman expects to collect a 15 to 20% less, and it will be you, the taxpayer, who will have to make up that shortfall. So to discuss this, we are joined by David French, Tax Consulting Director at Mazars. David, thank you so much. I mean, I'm not ecstatic about this conversation at all. If indeed it is true that the taxpayer might have to foot the bill, is that the reality thus far?
Good morning, Tamela, and thank you for having me. It all comes down to us at the end of the day. Yes, for the most part, what we've been seeing in the lockdown period is obviously a decrease in the economy, and as a result, SARS won't collect tax. They have their targets for the year, and that is all balanced in the budget the minister announced in February this year. And something is going to have to be done, because on top of having to spend more for the various programs that the government has undertaken, we are going to be collecting less. And the big question is, where does that come from? Yeah. And we don't know.
And let's talk about those losses for a moment there, David. I mean, if we're talking about a 15 to 20% tax loss from SARS, the Minister of COGTA, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, outlined today that could amount to approximately 250 billion rand. So please just break it down for us, especially when it comes to the most controversial topics, which is tobacco and alcohol. Just in terms of those two items, how much of tax losses has SARS recorded?
I must admit I haven't seen the numbers up till now, and it's a bit difficult for me to estimate that, but it's going to be a fair amount of money. What has happened is there's been no sales of cigarettes, which means there's my understanding, no production. Production of alcohol has been lifted a little bit in the past few weeks, as I understand it, and we collect our taxes on that. And we talk about collecting it at source, that's at the manufacturing process, the so-called excise taxes. So there's been no inflow, as I understand, to SARS of those amounts. On top of that, SARS, in order to try and alleviate the burden on these manufacturers, as we start out with manufacturing again, has delayed the payment of those that will be collected. So manufacturers will have a couple of extra months to pay the excise taxes. So again, they'll collect what is due to the manufacturing starting up, but they'll only collect it later. So whilst we might be short overall, we're also going to have some cash flow issues, because obviously the government doesn't need the money all at the end of the year. It needs it during the year in order to spend it. So it's going to be interesting times.
Indeed. And just speaking of government there, I mean, obviously this has a knock-on effect on Treasury. They had outlined their budget earlier on. So obviously the lockdown has an impact on that national budget. Just talk about perhaps what this then means for Treasury in perhaps just reassessing the national budget moving forward, at least during this lockdown imposed.
Yes, I would not like to be some of the people in Treasury at the moment trying to find where they're going to get the money and how they're going to rebalance things. The minister has indicated he would like to present an updated budget sometime in June, as I understand it, so that we can try and balance this. We are seeing that we can get certain amounts through the IMF, through the World Bank, and that will help us out. But the economists in Treasury are desperately, I would think, trying to model how do we balance this all? How do we move money around that we have, that we know we can collect, because there's certainly a certain base that we can collect, and how do we get this all into the right place so that we can continue to be effective as a government? And that is taking, I would think, a fair amount of brain power and a lot of coffee.
I suppose it is taking that long. Well, David French, thank you so much for joining us right here on ENCA. Tax Consultant Director at Mazars, just talking to us, of course, about the projected losses by SARS, but also, of course, what government plans to do to Lesizwe at this point, National Treasury more specifically, when it comes to that national budget, which I suppose come June 24th, they'll need to re-outline.